Welcome to The Jump. I'm Rich Bowers, and today with me I have Matthew Truelove, and we're going to talk about GitHub Copilot. Now, GitHub Copilot has been around for a little while, and most of us are familiar with it. However, I thought we'd start with the basics, especially with Matt here with us. Matt, what is GitHub Copilot?
Yeah, well, first of all, wonderful to be here again, Rich. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
And GitHub Copilot is, I've used it quite extensively. I'm not a sales rep for it, but I am excited about it if you hear any energy behind my voice with it. It is a paired programming tool as AI. So your paired partner is a generative AI tool called GitHub Copilot with you as the developer.
So, do I have to be a developer to utilize GitHub really for the reasons that it's created? GitHub Copilot, that is.
I'm going to go ahead and say yes. You need to have some sort of development or coding background where, as we'll see, I think later on, if you're not knowledgeable enough about basic project structure or coding principles, you are going to potentially get a little bit buried in your prompting techniques that are required to code without it.
Okay, and that's fair. There's different tools for everything. So this one just happens to be more geared towards developers or folks with some type of IT existing knowledge. You mentioned paired programming, correct?
That is correct.
When you say that term, what is paired programming?
And that's a good question. Paired programming is something that's often used in the industry. Sometimes you use it in like classes, but it's hence the name pair. You're partnered up with someone to develop a certain feature of an application or code in general, data analysis, whatever it is you're doing in computer science and IT. It's like an accountability buddy. You know, if you go work out with someone, if you're by yourself, it's easy to not get there at 6:30 in the morning. But if you have someone there waiting for you, then you're like, okay, I got to show up.
That's a great example. Paired programming, most people are familiar with the term than when you're with an actual human. So this one is a coding assistant is really what it is. Before we go into some of the examples, this coding assistant is based off of generative AI though, correct?
That is correct. So this coding assistant is based off of GitHub Copilot's model. They use an underlying model called Codex under the hood. It's similar to GPT-4, and GitHub is owned by Microsoft, of course, who has GPT-4 as well. So there are some similarities in the training and development. One thing that GitHub Copilot has going with it is GitHub is the #1 online repository for code, sharing and doing collaborative code where you can pull projects, send them to other people, right? That's what GitHub is. Copilot is trained off of the millions of bytes of data on Copilot, the publicly available ones too. So it has that advantage.
That's interesting of how they're able to blend all of their products. And by their, in essence, I'm talking about Microsoft. So you have GitHub, which is a repository where people can share code, borrow code, really open source, would you say?
Absolutely. I mean, you can make repositories private, but nonetheless, if you do, you choose who wants to access it and share the code.
Very cool. So you can access there, you can share your code, you can work with other people's code then. And you're also using potentially Microsoft's favorite LLM in ChatGPT. And we'll talk about maybe a new feature where you could switch that a little bit on here. So let's go back to the developer piece. So I'm a developer and I'm looking to use GitHub Copilot. Can you provide some examples just verbally here on when a developer would use Copilot and go to it right away?
Absolutely. So one of the advantages of using Copilot, first off, is it's going to be integrated into your integrated development environments or IDEs, your coding editor. The most popular choice for that is Visual Studio Code. That's what I'll be using in a little bit. It does integrate with IntelliJ, among a few others. And with that, that means that the interface for the chat or the other ways that you can interact with the model are built into where you are coding, and it can gain access to that context. And so that makes it very, very useful. Let's say I have my system terminal open and I forgot, okay, wait, what's the startup command, or I need to add this node package via the terminal to run my application. I don't remember what the command for that is. You can actually have Copilot right there that has access to your terminal and able to give you the command, and you can actually just click a button that injects it into your terminal to run for you. You don't even, it cuts out some of the copy paste.
Wow. And, so just a quick kind of type and it will recommend what to do or provide exactly what you're looking for and then be able to implement it. So you're saving just multiple steps, right?
Exactly. This is, again, more specific examples, really, really useful for when you're trying to do build settings on a project. I've used it extensively for styling of front ends, and because CSS is massive and I'm trying to position things right, get the right shades of color. And you can actually have Copilot look at your CSS files and then provide recommendations automatically in there. You can see if you like it. It's pretty easy to work with.
Awesome. They just released a handful of new features too. And for instance, Satya Nadella, he was actually really excited about Copilot workspaces during one of his conferences. I think that was something else that was a few months ago that has caught some traction. What is Copilot workspaces?
So Copilot workspaces exist in a couple of different forms. When you're on your editor and you have Copilot opened, let's say that you want to make a new C#.NET project, which is also a Microsoft product. I can actually, through prompt engineering, set things up in Copilot chat to say, I would like to make a API that sells shoes online, for example. I can attach a product requirements document for context, whatever it may be, and then enter that into the model. And the output that comes back actually oftentimes can have a create workspace button. So it'll propose a base project structure with some of the basic boilerplate code that you need for any of those types of apps, Spring Boot, .NET, whatever you're working in. And it can reference the context of your product requirements document too, and actually do more than just create a blank project with some of the basic things in there.
Very cool. And apparently our editing software really enjoyed what you said with that thumbs up right there. So just quick clarification, does it have to be Microsoft program languages?
No, it doesn't. I found, though, through my own experience, that it works best, go figure, with the Microsoft products. But I have used it for React and Spring Boot applications as well. But you gotta craft the prompts a little bit more specifically.
Okay, fair. I wonder if it's their purpose. AI agents. I know there's some talk of AI agents involved in the workspaces. Can you break that down and how they're being utilized?
Yeah, so AI agents, if you're able to provide what framework you're potentially using, like Crew AI or other such tools, Copilot is trained on some of the AI agents where you could get Python scripts generated in the Crew AI format and then have it actually emulate the output feeds that it needs to have be received by its fellow agents as well. So that is a new feature where, as agentic AI has surged in the news here, Copilot is recognizing that as a scope of work within their workspace.
Interesting. So then it has the ability to say, maybe identify an issue and solve it almost soup to nuts?
With anything prompt engineering in a generative AI model, Copilot included, you got to make sure that the context is sufficiently there. So the reference files it needs, any of the libraries that you're using for your agents, that sort of stuff. Sometimes I found with some of it, you have to repeatedly provide context.
Sure.
So there's some nuance, but it is coming a long way.
Okay, cool. And we see that with all language models. The area that I was most excited for, I believe, was their security scanning. And it basically, I think it's called advanced security, and it seeks out issues. Or you can quickly click the resolution and it will implement that. Is that one of the updates that they just released? And then what are some others that are somewhat similar that you've seen?
Yeah, so with the security features that have been enhanced with the latest updates, other models, I won't list them by name, but other models have been a little reluctant to provide suggestions because of the risk of hallucinations and other things when it comes to security. And all of a sudden you have liability factors and stuff. And let's say you have a breach and you implemented generated security patches, right? Then all of a sudden finger pointing starts and everything. Copilot has gone ahead and said, you know what, we're going to try that. It exists within your integrated environment, but also where it works best is actually on the GitHub website. So when you're on GitHub Online, anytime you were using GitHub for the last 10 years or so, and you pushed code onto the online repository, because you're pushing it into Microsoft's servers essentially, they had some basic security and vulnerability scans, and you could get some automatic emails saying like, hey, you're using an old version of this security library, so on and so forth. So that's existed for a while. They've built on that to now be integrated into the AI fashion, generative AI fashion, where you can actually ask about it. You can interface in the chat bot, and Copilot, when you are on the GitHub website, actually not just on your editor, but has a chat interface on the website to talk about the security features too.
I think they're calling it chat plus editing or so. Very neat. So anything else that we should be aware of before we take a dive into a demo?
The ways that you can interface with Copilot in your editor used to be able, or you still can do it with comments. There are some inline interactions or prompts you can inject. There's the chat window, but now they actually have, you mentioned it, Rich, the editor window, so chat plus editor. And that editor window works a little bit better for not just generating code and then giving you a suggestion and you make the decision on if you want to copy and paste it into your files, but it'll actually build files from scratch and potentially inject code straight into your project for you without you having to move your cursor around or anything like that.
Wow. So you can see just by Matt explaining it, just how much time all of this can save. I mean, even the simple creations of the boilerplate code, the edits, instead of going from Google searches or your own personal documentation to instantly showing you what it is and then implementing it. And then the chat feature on the side. Of course, always when you're dealing with Gen AI, these type of models, you're going to have to make adjustments. It's an iterative process at certain times. I'm interested to see really how these AI agents are utilized as well, and if you can kind of set them off and go tackle even more to make this platform even stronger. It seems like that's the direction they're going. But I know we have a special treat, a demo aligned where Matt will walk us through this. Now, for those of you that have been listening to The Jump for a while, we previously have done a GitHub Copilot Basics walkthrough probably about a year ago with Matt himself. So this will be an add-on of some of the newer features that GitHub Copilot has released. And so with that being said, Matt, I will pass it to you to walk us through some of these cool enhancements.
Awesome. I'm really excited about this, Rich. Let's take a look here. So I'm sharing here, and the reason I have two windows open is I have Visual Studio Code, my editor of choice, and honestly what I think works best with Copilot, ready. And then I have my web browser down here. And the reason being is we're going to use Copilot to quickly get up and running a very, very simple front-end application. And I say front-end, it's not going to be a spa like React or Angular or anything. I'm just going to do basic HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You'll see with the prompts that I input up here on the right-hand side, the upper right-hand side, to my Copilot chat. That's going to show some of the workspaces we were talking about, and you're also going to see the editor. And then down here in my web browser, we'll be able to visually see what effects the code suggestions are having an effect on here. So in this workspace, I've gone ahead and just done a little bit of prep in the interest of time, where I have a sample PRD that just outlines, let's make a furniture retail website. You can think of like Wayfair or something like that. And I have some basic images here preloaded so that we can plug them into our website and we can see some things. But other than that, that's all I've done over here. Nothing else is readily generated. So again, I'm on VS Code. I'm in the workspace, basically the folder I want to be in. And now I've got the Copilot on the sidebar here, chat on the right-hand side. Now, along with workspaces, these @ signs, allow me to specify context within my workspace. So if I have questions about VS Code's setup itself, I mentioned my terminal right here, things about GitHub, I can set context with these annotations, and some of these are going to automatically be applied with my prompts, as you'll see. So I'm going to say, first of all, this PRD, I have it saved in 3 different formats. I've got a Word document, a PDF, and then I've actually gone ahead and converted it to a text document. So if I click on the text document, it's not necessarily the easiest to read. The PDF would be doing that. But Copilot in VS Code can't actually read PDF documents. So that's an important nuance to note if you're trying to attach files to provide context to your code, such as a PRD that's in PDF format. It's not going, you're going to have some issues, and you may or may not get a direct message saying, hey, I can't read the PDF. So I've gone ahead and taken the liberty of extracting the text and putting it into a text file that I know Copilot can read. So with that, this just outlines some basic functionality of our site. I'm going to close this though and just attach the file here. And there we go. Okay, cool. It is included right there. And so now I'm going to say I need to generate a front end application using simply HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This website, it renders a furniture retail application with requirements outlined in this PRD document. Please create the new basic workspace for this. All right, fingers crossed. I have done this before, but let's see what happens here. Cool. Okay. Furniture, retail, website. It gave us a source folder with some CSS, JavaScript. Doesn't look like it did any. Oh, and a README file too. Nice. Images. Now here's what I was talking about a moment ago. Here's the create workspace button. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create, and it should generate all of this starter or boilerplate code for me. Let's see what happens.
And Matt, while this is loading, how long would typical boilerplate type of coding take to put into an IDE?
You know, that's a really good question, Rich. Depending on, this is a front end. So if I were using something like Angular or React or Next.js, they do have starter projects or templates you can use that basically once you hit a command in your terminal, it'll build the necessary like library package files and that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But this has gone and done a little bit more. If you see here on the right-hand side, it's actually made my shopping cart page, and I can click here and actually take a look at it.
Wow.
So this is beyond just boilerplate code. This is actual templated HTML that I could open up in my browser and essentially render right now.
So when they say that GitHub Copilot could be the reason for this crazy percentage of increase, let's say 40, 50, 60%, is that hyperbole, or are we seeing it right here where that actually might be a realistic percentage in time saving?
Absolutely. Especially with getting started on projects, this, as you can see, bootstraps things quite a bit. Now, again, other things like Spring Boot have their own initializer and things like that to quickly make a project. But I just did this in a plain old chat interface. I didn't have to learn how to interact with the Spring initializer or anything like that. I could use plain language in my prompt.
Okay, very, very cool. I'll give it back to you. Just had those couple questions.
Yeah. So let's go ahead, and I'm curious to see, right? It's not necessarily going to be perfect, but this is something to start with. Now, I do have enough knowledge of coding and development to understand, okay, where do I need to go for this project? to see where things are. I'm going to move, I know I want to move this images folder inside of this project. If I didn't know that sort of stuff, I could obviously further my prompting, the conversational methods here to extract more information from the model on what I need to do. But if you are looking for efficiency, not having to go down every single rabbit hole, right, and being somewhat of an SME certainly does help. All right, so here, index.html is our root page for this particular app. I'm going to right click here to open, and that's why I have the browser down here. And check it out. I mean, it doesn't look fantastic yet, but I literally just made a prompt. I didn't code anything. And so for those of you in development, you know, it can take a while just to get this far. And in theory, let's see. Yeah, I mean, it's got some different pages. Look at that. There's a checkout cart. There's a products page. I need to do a lot of work with the styling, but we've got a fair amount already on here.
You know, Matt, wanted to ask you this because with this, it's so impressive because just 2020, 2019 training program, this would be what, a 2-day project at least?
Yes, absolutely. Multiple days project, a lot of time, especially if you're not familiar with certain libraries with animation features of CSS, for example, or to do buttons and stuff like that in JavaScript, having to look things up on resources like Stack Overflow, different READMEs, documentations, just to see what examples you could plug in, only to find out you don't like the layout that you just researched too, and now you got to go find another example.
Wow, incredible.
Let's see, I'm going to click on homepage works. There's not really anything here. The nav bar needs some work, but again, I have some basic stuff right here. And so now I can come back over here to chat, or I can go directly if I open up index.html and I click this other bar here. This is the edit with Copilot, and it really works similar to chat. They've actually extracted this feature from the chat and put it in its own interface. And this is going to set context. As you see, the file that I currently have open is automatically plugged in. And then I could do things like, I need to update this project to use the Bootstrap styling framework for responsive design. Can we update my index here to include the CDN information to load Bootstrap 5? Basically, we're going to make it look a little prettier right here.
Got it.
And let's see. So this is showing that Copilot is live interfacing with data and documentation on the web too, to be able to pull the latest information for basically how to plug in this library. That's what happened up here. You see these green lines?
Mm-hmm.
The editor, it is directly making changes. I didn't even ask it to add it beyond just my prompt. So the green lines are additions. If there were any deletions, just like on GitHub, it would show as red. So my code has been altered, and then I can hit accept right here to then say, you know what? Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and do that. Let me save this project and refresh and see if anything has changed. Not likely, because I don't have any of the Bootstrap classes implemented, but the website's still working. So that's the editor here. That's pretty cool.
That's
and
neat.
Just in the interest of time, let me show you one little update here. We can maybe fix the nav bar with the editor right here. Here's our navigation. And if I wasn't aware of that, by the way, I'm obviously pulling from my own knowledge, I could go to Copilot and I could do explain. So at any point, if you're lost or you don't know where to look or what's next, you can look for little anchor points or context clues and then do a Copilot explain. I can do it for a whole file as well. Or let's say I have a paired programming partner who didn't comment or document any of the code they wrote, and I have no idea what it means. I could get Copilot to hopefully explain some things there too. So
cool. You wish you had that previously, it sounds like.
a little bit, yeah. But here it's saying, right, this is the nav element. It's got an unordered list. That's what the UL stand for, by the way, in HTML. So I'm able to learn as I go very, very nicely with the explain this feature.
Cool.
And so reading this, let's say now I'm comfortable with what's happening right here. Be like, can we, oh, it switched me over to the chat window though, by the way. You got to keep an eye on that. Let me go over to the editor and I'll say, can we refactor this page to use Bootstrap library elements for the navigation and put the main content into a responsive container. And let's see what happens. Okay, so again, greens highlight some sort of addition took place on those line numbers. Red means something was subtracted. Okay, cool. It does look like it added what I think are the right Bootstrap references. Let's go ahead and hit accept. Let me save the file and let me refresh and see what sort of changes might have occurred here. Okay, so the font changed just a little bit, if you notice. And if I resize the page here, you can see it start to follow with that Bootstrap container that I just included. So we're getting some pretty cool stuff going. If I wanted to kind of keep going on this, here's my CSS file, and I could obviously come in here and do some color changes, positioning changes, and all sorts of really cool stuff. So it's just a matter of how much more do we want to flesh this out for our demonstration purposes, Rich?
I think this is a great start. This is a wonderful place to kind of show the capabilities. You highlighted some of the new features. So overall, and also, by the way, you showcased why you are the manager of training right now. I mean, very easy to follow through with what you're doing, and the explanations are very welcomed. One other piece. Some of these features are available on the now free version of GitHub Copilot, but there are some limitations with the free version as opposed to paid.
Yes, there are some limitations. One of them we talked about earlier, security. Security is going to be into paid, for example.
Okay. And you explained some of the reasons and logic behind potentially why and why others don't do it. So it makes sense that that's behind the paywall. Absolutely outstanding. Before we depart, even in training utilization, I'm curious, I'm a trainer at heart and I know you are as well. Is this a type of coding assistant that could lead to somebody learning almost independently how to code create websites, as you just showed? Is that something that, for instance, I have enough to be dangerous, I start working on GitHub Copilot, and that can help take me to the next level?
I do think so. And your speed is going to vary based on your experience level. So if you're trying to just get into coding, then obviously some of the things I did in our demo where I knew to look at like the index file, I knew where to go for certain styling changes, I knew about the Bootstrap library to begin with. That's from my own knowledge. A beginner's not necessarily going to have that. So you wouldn't necessarily not be able to use Copilot. You would just be doing more prompts to figure out what it is that you don't know to get you started.
Interesting. I could see learning and development teams utilizing that even more in independent exercises too. So with that being said, wonderful breakdown. I appreciate it as always, Matt. Always a wonderful time to have you on here and explain, especially GitHub Copilot, almost on par with your AWS knowledge, it sounds like. So, Matt, thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody. For The Jump, I'm Rich Bowers. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.